The dangers of visiting Jerusalem. Only the 12 apostles knew when they left Magadan that Jesus intended to go to the Feast of Tabernacles. This also surprised his own followers when he appeared in the temple courts and began to teach openly. Long before the situation around Jesus became dangerous, prominent believers had often urged Jesus to move to Jerusalem. Believing that the center of Jewish culture was the most strategic place to spread the message of the kingdom of heaven. However, now that Jesus had actually come to Jerusalem to teach, these same believers feared for his life. Everyone was aware of the measures the Sanhedrin had taken against Jesus, and there was still an arrest warrant for legal proceedings. In response to their previous urgent requests to go to Jerusalem, he had replied, "The hour has not yet come." Now he responded to their anxious objections with only, "My hour has come." Even his apostles were uneasy. Only recently they had had to flee, and now their master dared to venture into the lion's den. What troubled them most was that Jesus had often hinted in recent weeks that he would soon have to undergo death. During the Feast of Tabernacles, Jesus boldly entered Jerusalem on several occasions and taught openly in the temple. Jesus' bold appearance in Jerusalem confused his followers. Many of his followers, and even Judas Iscariot, had thought that Jesus had fled hastily to Phoenicia because he had become afraid of the Jewish leaders and Herod Antipas. They did not understand the purpose of their master's actions. His presence in Jerusalem at the Feast of Tabernacles, even against the advice of his followers, was enough to put an end to all whispers of fear and cowardice. The main reason Jesus could teach openly in the temple courts without being arrested was the division within the Sanhedrin. Some members of the Sanhedrin had secretly begun to believe in Jesus, and others were firmly against arresting him during the feast, as many people in Jerusalem were now favorably inclined toward him. The efforts of Abner and his companions throughout Judea had also contributed to a more favorable climate for Jesus. So much so that Jesus' enemies did not dare show themselves openly during this feast. Thus, Jesus could visit Jerusalem freely and leave alive. 1 or 2 months earlier, they would have certainly lynched him. Jesus' bold public appearances in Jerusalem intimidated his enemies. They were completely surprised and unprepared. They were also unable to reorganize quickly and effectively. Several times that month, the Sanhedrin made weak attempts to arrest Jesus, but these failed. There was confusion, and they assumed that he had been promised protection by the Roman authorities. By the time they realized this was not the case, Jesus had already left their jurisdiction. Jesus himself had been keen to appear at the temple during the Feast of Tabernacles for strategic reasons. Many pilgrims from distant lands were unaware of recent developments. They had heard stories in their own regions about a new prophet named Jesus, and they hoped to learn more about him during their visit to Jerusalem. They were not disappointed, for he taught on several occasions in Solomon's colonnade and elsewhere in the temple courts. Many of these pilgrims even came to Bethany afterward to speak with the apostles and to be instructed in the matters of the kingdom of heaven. His enemies hesitated to condemn him openly for fear of the many citizens who were favorably inclined toward him. On the other hand, many secret followers were afraid to come out openly for him, fearing the Jewish leaders, sensing that the Sanhedrin was determined to deal with him. During these teachings in the temple courts, Jesus astonished friend and foe alike, especially the intellectual inhabitants of Jerusalem, as they knew that he had never received instruction from the rabbis. Whenever he went to Jerusalem, his apostles were terrified. They became more fearful as Jesus increasingly boldly claimed a platform around the temple to publicly proclaim the nature of his mission on earth.